Hi, my name's Andrew Prendergast. I'm Senior Partner over here at White Dalton Motorcycle Solicitors, and this is the second episode in the Truth About Collision Investigation. Okay, and Chris, so we've talked about your background, we've talked about the police, we've talked about your move into Civvy Street, as it were. Yep. So I think it'd be super useful now if we just turn our attention to one of the cases you and I worked on over the years, because it involves both the criminal aspect and a civil aspect of poor people, both riders actually. Our chap got injured, the other chap got killed, unfortunately. Yep. So let's bring that in. What do you have to say about this case? Let's set the scene of what happened in this particular case.
Right. Because it was done by the police and we got involved later, we obviously haven't got the benefit of fresh evidence.
So in that case then, there's been an accident. The police have turned up. They've done what you were doing in a previous life, done a scene investigation. Yeah. We'll talk about whether it was good or bad in a minute. But they've gathered the evidence and then they've decided to pass that to the CPS, who've decided to prosecute our client who's riding a bike. Yeah. So just talk me through what had actually happened in the case.
Again, nice sunny morning on a Sunday morning. We're in one of the northern counties of Britain.
We won't say where.
No. Our client who survived the collision had recently passed his test.
Okay.
And had treated himself to a 900cc super sport motorcycle.
So proper fast bike.
Yes. He was travelling east on the road.
Yeah.
Which is an undulating, continual curvy road, ups and down gradients.
So proper good fun road.
A good scratchy motorbike road.
Yeah.
To his left, he's got a steep up gradient.
Yeah.
To his right, he's got the oncoming traffic lane that is a crash barrier, and then there's a steep down gradient.
So you're talking not a mountain road, but a good road in the hills, basically twisting through, great for riding a bike.
It's on the edge of the hills, yeah.
You got a good view, but you don't want to fall down it, basically.
No. And he's travelling an up gradient.
Yeah.
And he's approaching a left-hand curve for him.
Got you.
He can't see around the left-hand curve because of the steep up gradient on the left-hand verge.
So with the hills and whatnot, tight left-hander, can't see a thing.
Right. So that's his direction of travel. The other motorcycle is a 1000cc super sports, immaculately kept, immaculately looked after. The rider is a mature rider of some note in the area. He's known as a good, fast rider.
So he's handy. He's known.
He knows the bike, he knows the roads.
Yeah.
He's travelling west, so for his benefit, he's already come round several bends to left and right, and he's approaching a right-hand bend in the road.
So he's come from the opposite direction?
From the opposite direction.
Got you.
To his left is the crash barrier and the steep down gradient. Near the crash barrier, this was shown on the police photographs and on my subsequent visit, is a lot of loose gravel and debris.
Yeah.
He can't see what's coming round the bend. But they go around the bend and they meet the two motorcycles.
So we're talking on the bend, probably somewhere near the
apex
centre
of the bend.
Yeah.
So the collision occurs. The mature rider is thrown west, dies as a result of his injuries.
Okay.
Our client, after impact, off his bike, serious injuries. The police turn up. They do everything they're supposed to do.
Supposedly. Allegedly.
Surveyed.
Okay.
Photographed, measured, observations, bike checks.
They've ticked the right boxes.
They've done all the boxes. The case is then investigated and the case goes to CPS, who decide to do the surviving rider for death by dangerous driving.
And he becomes our client.
Yeah.
So this is where you get involved.
This is where I get involved. So it's probably about 12 months after the initial collision that myself and somebody from your office, we meet up at the police garage and examine both the motorcycles. Both in great condition, no defects, no failures. Both had got frontal damage, consistent with an almost head-on collision.
Which ties in with what we know from the scene as well.
The only discrepancy is the collision investigator stated that the right-hand side of the 1000cc motorcycle, the mature rider's bike,
the dead man,
had been struck on its right side, not its front. Which,
So already you've got an inkling there's something
there's
a little bit off.
something not quite right there.
Okay.
So we do the vehicle exam. I go to the scene. I do my measurements, my photographs, approach shots.
So like when you used to be a police
It's the
investigator,
same
same thing. You're going through the same process. I'm going to take my own pictures of the scene. I'm going to do my own measurements of the scene because ultimately you might have to go and give expert evidence in your duties to the court.
And I also, which a lot of collision investigators don't do, I also visited the collision scene on a motorcycle.
Okay.
So I can do a ride through each way, and I video that ride through.
So you can then refer to it in a report.
One, I can refer to it, and two, it gives a better picture of the scene to the jury or the judge or the tribunal.
And also as well, I always think getting videos from a biker's perspective, you're sitting up higher than most cars. And I've seen the videos you produced before in the past, you might have the camera strapped to a helmet or whatever, so you get a more realistic video rather than just being sat on a bonnet.
You can see what the motorcyclist would have been doing rather than a detached view from the inside the car.
Got you. So you've done your scene visit, you've done a video run through. What happens next? You start looking and comparing what you've got to what the police have got?
Well, yes. We've been supplied with a complete police report, photographs, aerial photographs, and damage to the motorcycles.
So just for the benefit of the viewer at home, when you have an accident like this, we as solicitors, believe it or not, we have to pay a fee to the police to get the reports. So if it's a fatal accident, you might be looking somewhere between £1,000 and £1,500 ballpark figure to get the report, because they've got big reports, accident reconstruction reports, photographs, witness evidence, that sort of stuff. So we'll pay to get in what the police have got, and then if Chris is instructed, or an expert like Chris, we then instruct Chris to look at all this and then visit the scene and give us his report. So he might be going, yep, the police have got it right, or hang on a minute, something's looking a bit off here, and where do we get to from that, Chris?
One of the important documents they gave us was also the collision survey.
So a big plan, basically.
Yeah. And just for the benefit of the viewers, to do an electronic survey, it was before the 360 super duper jobbies, you would have a surveying head which sends out a beam which bounces off a prism, and the operator will have the prism on the end of a pole, and he will put it on each section of what he's recording.
So you'll walk around an accident scene, let's say it's this in front of us.
Yep.
And I would stand next to, say, that bike with a pole, effectively, and that computer would then recognise where the pole was and make a map for me.
What you would do in reality, you would start at the curbs and you would draw the road layout.
Yeah.
Every time you press the button, the beam of light comes out and takes a measurement, which is a point. And to do a bend, you might do 50 measurements around the curve.
Got you. And
the other side as well, centre of the road. And then you would look at your physical evidence, and you would have a skid mark, and you may put several chalk or paint marks on the skid mark.
Yeah.
And then you would walk through with your prism and measure each point. When you download it into a computer, it would bring out a lovely picture of the scene, and it would also show the skid marks, gouge marks, if you've done them, positions of the motorcycles. And these are fixed in the program of the computer. Anyway, we'd got this, and as I was doing my report, I've read through the Collision Investigator for the Forces report, the Constabulary's report, and he states that in his conclusions that the 900C motorcycle travelling east, our client, was on the near side edge of his carriageway.
Okay.
Right up on the side, which was the totally incorrect position to take a left curve.
Yeah.
He then states that there were skid marks that extended from the curb across the westbound carriageway, crossed the centre double white lines, and that the oncoming motorcycle, being ridden by the deceased, was struck entirely within the westbound carriageway.
So what you're basically saying in layman's terms, you're saying that the police have got the conclusion that our boy is basically in the wrong position, skidded across the road, gone on the wrong side of the road, and he's caused the collision with the other guy who killed him. That's basically it. That's
basically what's happened. He's come up with his conclusion and said that the defendant's motorcycle, the front of the defendant's motorcycle, had hit the right side of the deceased's motorcycle. He also states that the skid mark extended from the curve across the double white lines entirely into the incorrect traffic lane where the collision had occurred.
So on the face of it then, if that's all true,
Yeah.
our chap's for the chop, both in the criminal case and any civil case he wanted to bring. So he's in real trouble if the police prove that, correct?
And one of the conclusions that the police accident investigator come up with, he must have braked because he was going too fast to take the bend.
So we're back to some assumptions then, Chris.
There was a lot of assumptions there, but he was going too fast to take the bend, but he didn't calculate a speed.
So would it be fair to say once you'd done your bit and then looked at what the police had done, you had some alarm bells?
We had a few little alarm bells ringing. The scale plan showed a skid mark that started on the near side curb of our client. When I compared it to the photographs, the skid mark started just to the left of the centre of that traffic lane.
So probably what's that, about 4 or 5 feet?
Yeah, at least 5 feet away from the curb.
Yeah. Or 2 metres-ish in new money.
In new letters, yeah. He then stated that the skid mark extended across the double white lines entirely onto the incorrect side of the road when the collision occurred. Compared the survey to the photographs showed that the skid mark started just to the near side of the centre of the carriageway and extended to just before the double white lines. And he also said that it must have happened like this because the defendant's bike went into the right side of the deceased bike.
So you already know from what you said a minute ago, you've got alarm bells when you looked at the vehicle examination report, it wasn't quite right of where this impact was. You've got alarm bells ringing because the skid mark located on the plan is different to what's shown in the map.
In location, and it extends too far.
So there's a few things in there where you're going, whoa, hang on, all of this is wrong, basically.
So I went through it, I checked everything and decided that for some reason there was a discrepancy between the police officer's scale plan and his photographs.
So you're being polite, there's some discrepancies. Chris would never be so bold to say why it was. You could say it's incompetence. Some could say someone would have been deliberately bent about something. We'll never know.
No.
And I wouldn't allege it. But nonetheless,
there was a disparity.
Factually, it was wrong.
Yeah. And I produced my report. The first thing I had to say, the position of the skid mark in the photographs showed us that our client was at about the right position for a layman motorcyclist to take a left curve.
Yeah.
In years gone by, the DSA have produced rider handbooks and tried to push everyone towards the advanced positioning system of riding. If you don't use the whole book of advanced positioning, you're going to put yourself in a place of danger rather than making the bend safer.
But it'd be fair to say, though, there was no evidence our client was on the wrong side of the road and caused this. And you could say he could have ridden better or been in a better position. But long story short is, what he was doing
was acceptable.
Within the confines of the law, and there's no evidence he was speeding or doing anything silly. So he might not be the best rider in the world, but he wasn't doing anything illegal as far as we could work out.
And
okay.
Having looked at it, I had to conclude where the skid mark started towards the centre of the lane. It didn't reach the centre white lines. The length of the motorcycle that had caused the skid marks, our clients, would have put it at or about the centre white line.
Yeah.
And the point of impact was clearly shown on the photographs on the centre white line. So both vehicles must have been at the centre of the road at impact.
But your conclusions are completely at odds of what the police said. So what had happened after the police had done their investigations is they'd, like they do, they passed it over to the CPS, who decided to go and prosecute our client for death by dangerous driving. Yeah. And your role is to come in as a defence expert and see if you can raise that reasonable doubt.
Or to see if the police is accurate.
Yeah, quite. So if there is any doubt, great. If there's not, you will confirm and say, no, the police are bang on. So we're exploring it. Yeah. And we explored it, and some over the years we've explored and found the police have been spot on, and we have to advise our clients that. And some we've looked at over the years, we look at and we find the police have not been spot on.
No.
And this is one of the latter ones.
This is one of the latter ones. And I looked at all the evidence. The collision obviously occurred on the centre white lines where both bikes must have been. I looked at the route that the deceased bike went, and my conclusions were he either steered towards the centre of the road to avoid loose debris or detritus on the side of the road, which hadn't been mentioned by the police.
Got you. So you're looking for another explanation as to what's happened. Yep.
Or Sunday morning early, there's always the possibility, or the only other alternative is he took a racing line through the bend.
So our experienced rider that unfortunately got killed could have been on a lively ride out that morning and you know.
He just got it wrong at that. Well, he got it wrong at that spot at that time.
Yeah, and it was one of those things.
And we couldn't negate either one of those two possibilities.
Fair enough. So when you went off eventually, and it did go all the way to a criminal trial.
It did.
And the CPS needed to try and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that our chap had done something wrong and had been dangerous in the way he's riding. The outcome of that was...
We had a 3-day trial and he was found not guilty.
Okay.
And the judge had some words for the prosecution
police.
Experts as well.
Fair play. And just off the back of that, once we'd finished the criminal case, because our chap was looking at a very serious charge, could have ended up in prison. Once he was found not guilty, then we looked and represented with Chris' assistance as an expert at bringing a civil claim. So in a civil claim, the legal test is different. So instead of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the prosecution have to, that someone committed a crime, in the civil side of things, you have to prove on the balance of probabilities that, in this case, the deceased rider had done something wrong, which we were able to do. And then his insurance company had to compensate our chap who'd been injured in the accident. So that's the difference between the two, and that brings that case to a conclusion.
But just with what you just said, the case has effectively been heard twice, and both sides have eventually agreed that there must have been something untoward with the deceased riding.
Yes.
There was no change in any evidence that was produced. There was no different arguments.
You've worked with the raw material, and in both the court, the criminal court and the civil court, we've got to the same sort of conclusion, which is our chap was not guilty in the criminal, and we proved the other side had been to blame with the civil side of things.
My only other suggestion in the criminal file was that our client riding towards the bend was possibly startled by the sudden appearance and position of the advanced rider or the deceased rider, which is entirely what your client said
in interview straight afterwards.
So
that tied up with it. Yeah. So that was super informative. Thank you very much, Chris. And with that, it brings this episode to an end. Thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Any comments you put below, we do read everything, so please feel free to put those in there and we will answer any questions in a later video. And that brings this episode to an end.